you want to back up a little bit to Genesis 37, I'll meet you there in a moment. It's a great day, start of a new term. I hope you had a good week off, relaxing. I know some of you traveled. You were involved in ministry, caring for people, preaching. So grateful for that. For some of you, 1 down, 7 to go. For others, 5 down and only 3 to go. For you aimers, you're within 7 months of going to your field. But this is a new beginning, a new start. Pray that it's a blessing for all of us. So good to see Kelly today. Prayed for you often, brother. Joseph. Joseph was a man that inspires us in many ways. We talk about Joseph, and we talk about others in the Old Testament because Paul affirmed its value. In Romans 15, verse 4, when he wrote, "Whatsoever things were written beforehand were written for our instruction, that we, through perseverance and encouragement of the Scriptures, might have hope." Might have hope. So I challenge my students and everyone with whom I might have any kind of influence, if you're going to preach from the Old Testament, bring a hope-bringing message. It was written for that reason. And there's hope all over this passage. A lot of good things, good news in this passage. Now in the world, there's a lot of fake news. If you heard that the Yankees lost last weekend, fake news. Okay? That was all part of a big government conspiracy. Government cover-up. They thought the Yankees had already won way too many championships. After all, they have won more than double the second most successful team in October. But the government just thought it's time for somebody else. I mean, pity these Astros. They've only been to the series once. They got swept in 4 games, so maybe give them a shot at it. So you can't believe everything you hear on the news, but you can believe everything you read in the Bible. And so while sometimes we talk about the Old Testament stories, we don't ever need to imply that these are fiction. And it might come across that way. The stories of the Old Testament are true, and they're beneficial to us, as Joseph is to us. That reading in Genesis 50 sets kind of the conclusion or the framework for what we have with Joseph and his relationships with his brothers, his relationship with the world, with Egypt, but also his relationship with this idea. I want you to think for a moment. How many of you could be called forgetful? I mean, you don't have to be short for this, but if there were 8 dwarfs, doesn't that sound like a good name for number 8? Forgetful. Right there with bashful and dopey and doc and all these others. Forgetful. Now, if I were to ask you, how many of you really want to be known as forgetful, I don't think I'd have many hands rise. But by the time we're done, I believe every one of you will want your hands raised when I ask that question. Forgetful. It's very significant in this story. So Genesis 37 begins to tell us about Joseph. At the time, he's a 17-year-old smart aleck punk of a teenager. He's his father's favorite son. He probably has dishwater hands. Doesn't get out in the field much. His brothers despise him. And not only with all of this, his father makes him this special coat. This coat of royalty, this coat of many colors that signified something very special. Further reason for the brothers not to like Joseph. But besides all that, Joseph was a dreamer. Did God give him these dreams? Did God give him the ability to interpret dreams? Yes. But Joseph seems to enjoy telling his dreams to his brothers. So on one occasion he has this dream. We won't go into all the details, but in essence, the interpretation of the dream, at least what the brothers got from the dream, was all of Joseph's brothers are one day going to bow down and worship him. Now remember, in a large family, Joseph is number 11. 11th son born to the father Jacob. He's way down on the list. And they're all going to bow to him. He must have really smiled as he told that story and then hid behind Daddy when the brothers were after him. But he had another dream, and this dream also involved his parents as well as his 11 brothers bowing down to worship him. Later in the chapter, as the brothers are all out tending the family business with the flocks and the herds, Jacob sends Joseph out to talk to his sons just to check on things, see how they're going. The brothers see him at a distance and says, "Here comes that dreamer now." And they plot evil against him. The first thought was to kill him. Reuben, the oldest, said, "No, we can't do that. That wouldn't be right. But here's a cistern, here's a well. Let's just throw them down here. Let them suffer. Let them, yeah, see how we're going to bow down and worship you. We're all going to stand over you and look down on you." So they throw them in the pit. And as they're discussing what they might do, there's a band of Ishmaelites coming down, or a group of Midianites, depending on how old your translation of the Bible is. This band of Ishmaelites come, and so the brothers say, "We shouldn't kill them, that'd be wrong. Let's just sell them to these Ishmaelites." Did you ever wonder about that band of Ishmaelites? I always wondered. Country, rock and roll? What was this band going through the land? Well, they sell him, and Reuben at the time is away. And he's really bothered that they did this to their brother. They thought, Dad ain't going to be happy about this. And so they said, "Let's kill a goat, take its blood, and put it all over the garment, this special garment. We'll take it back to Dad. And he'll believe that Joseph was torn apart by wild animals." You know, you got to understand that back in the day, he couldn't go down to Miss Abby Shuto's lab and run a DNA test on the blood, and then he would have found out, it's not my son's blood, it's goat's blood. So all he can do is believe that his son has been torn apart by wild animals. Well, as we get to the end of chapter 37, Joseph is in Egypt. The Midianites have taken him there and sold him to the household of Potiphar, who was an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the bodyguard, very significant role where he would serve. Chapter 38 is not important to our study, but in chapter 39, the writer redirects our attention to Joseph. And it begins by saying in verse 1, Joseph had been taken to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man. Did you catch that? The Lord was with Joseph. That's a very important part of this story. The Lord was with Joseph. Say it with me. The Lord was with Joseph. That's key to this story. And a very similar statement will be made 2 more times in this chapter. Well, in chapter 39, Joseph, because he's successful, because the Lord is with him, because he's making the most of a bad situation, begins to serve in Potiphar's household. And Potiphar entrusts him with everything. Some of you young men are going to smile at this next statement. In verse 6 it says, Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. That's another way of saying he was strong and he was a hottie. Now I know some of you guys, I'm looking at Bryce over here, he's smiling, he's thinking, yeah, I know exactly what Joseph's problem was. No, really that's not true. I heard Bryce talking the other day, he's talking about all these handsome, good-looking, available men in Sunset. Let me tell you, Bryson, there's one less than what you were thinking. But at any rate, so Joseph is a really handsome young man, and he appeals to Potiphar's wife. And she wants him. Potiphar's gone, it's just the 2 of us in the house, why not? And she goes to him constantly, seeking him to come into her bedroom. And Joseph makes this wonderful statement that would to God we could all learn and appreciate and follow this instruction. Joseph says in verse 9, there's no one greater in this house than I. And he, referring to Potiphar, has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God? What did he recognize? It would be a great evil for him to be with her. He did not want to sin against God, and he knew it was sin. I don't know what the enticement was like. I don't know if she was a beautiful lady or not. That doesn't matter. Joseph knew it was sin, and he knew it was evil, and he did not want to violate the will of God. Now think about his situation, okay? His brothers betrayed him. His father, for all he knew, had forgotten him. You would have thought that Joseph in Egypt is thinking, where's Dad? He's going to come looking for me. He doesn't know how the brothers lied to their dad. Not only is he betrayed by his brothers and forgotten by his father, but he's in a foreign land. Now, you talk about how many people justify sin. You've got it here in at least 3 ways. People have mistreated me, so why should I serve God? The one who loves me the most doesn't care for me, so why should I follow the will of God? Furthermore, I'm in a foreign land. Who's going to know? I wonder how many people, while away on business or away on travel in a hotel room, knowing how easy it is to get on the internet, involve themselves in sin because they think nobody's going to know. Joseph saw that as evil and sin against his God. Well, no wonder the Lord was with him. He was with God. Something very significant in this story, though not written quite so directly. Well, as a result, what happens to Joseph? Potiphar comes home. He's incensed because Mrs. Potiphar, having been rejected, lies about Joseph. So now to add to his being betrayed by his brother, forgotten by his father, in a foreign land, now he's falsely accused of raping this woman. It's amazing that he wasn't put to death. Maybe it's because why? The Lord was with Joseph. But he ended up going into prison. And there, basically the same thing happened. Joseph made the best of his bad situation. And he began again to serve, and he was recognized as a servant, faithful and dependable. Look at chapter 39, verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph. Say it with me. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. And the chief jailer committed everything to Joseph's charge, all the prisoners who were in the jail, so that whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. And the chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge. Why? Say it with me. Because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made to prosper. He's prospering as a slave in Potiphar's house, prospering as a prisoner. And now we read on in chapter 40, and Pharaoh is a little upset at a couple of his servants. And so he gets the baker and the cupbearer. Okay, let's see. It's the baker, the butcher, the candlestick maker. It was the cupbearer and the baker. He was incensed at these guys, threw them into prison. Well, they knew Joseph in time. After all, Joseph was a servant in the place. And so it came about, these 2 guys had dreams. And Joseph noticed they were despondent. They didn't understand. And he said, God knows the interpretation of dreams. Tell me what you dreamt about. And so they tell him. And basically their dreams are similar with very different endings. The cupbearer comes and tells him his dream, and Joseph says, in essence, in 3 days Pharaoh's going to come. He's going to bring you out of this prison and restore you to your work. Well, the baker's thinking, I like that. I like that. So he tells him his dream, and it begins very similar. Joseph says to the baker, yeah, in 3 days, Pharaoh's going to bring you out of prison, but you're going to be put to death. And in 3 days, it happened exactly that way. Joseph says to the cupbearer, remember me. Remember me when you go to Pharaoh. Tell Pharaoh there's a man here who should not be in prison. If you've done prison ministry, you know about 99% of people in prison shouldn't be in prison. But that 1%, Joseph's part of that 1%. Well, guess what? Knowing Joseph's luck, no, the Lord was with him. But in Joseph's situation, the cupbearer forgot. Until a time when Pharaoh one morning looks really disturbed and troubled. And so the cupbearer asked him, he said, I had this dream, I can't figure it out. And then he remembers, man, there's this dude down in prison. He can interpret the dream. He told us what would happen to us, and it happened exactly as he said. So after 2 years of having been forgotten by this cupbearer, now Joseph is age 30. He comes out and interprets the dream to Pharaoh. And the interpretation is basically this: get ready for 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. And if you're smart, you'll get someone in charge of collecting all the excess during the 7 years of plenty, store up that grain, so we'll be ready during the 7 years of famine, and we can provide food and relief to people all over the world. Pharaoh says, oh, if only I could find such a man. And I think Joseph is thinking, and Joseph is put in charge. Short time later, we'll read in chapter 41 that Joseph is given a woman by the name of Asenath to become his wife. Did you get that? Asenath. A-S-E-N-A-T-H. Little better than Magor Misabib, right? Okay, Bob and I, we go way back here. So, Asenath is given to him as a wife. And then it says, verse 50, before the year of famine came. So now he's about age 36. It's been 6 years he's been a free man. And there's been plenty, and he's been taking care, building storehouses, and grain has been coming in. 2 sons were born to Joseph, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, a priest of On, bore to him. Joseph named the first one Manasseh. For he said, God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. He named the second one Ephraim. For God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. 2 sons, forgetful and fruitful. This name Manasseh is very significant here. At this time in Joseph's life, it's been 19 years since his brother sold him into slavery. 19 years. And he's got a child. And he names his son Forgetful. Why? Because this child helped him to forget the miseries that he had had in his life. Helped him forget some of the disappointments and the hardships. I think he gave him the name Forgetful because not only was the Lord with Joseph, but Joseph was with the Lord. This name Forgetful was really an honor. God had used him, put him in a place where now with this son, he's grateful again. Some of the misery of his past, he's been able to put behind him. A child will do that. Our firstborn. Well, my wife's first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. So our firstborn, what a blessing. He was our Manasseh. And I've known couples. In fact, I preached this lesson one night at a congregation, and afterward, a couple in their 80s came up and they were smiling ear to ear. And he says to me, this is my Manasseh. Both these two had lost their first spouse to death only a year or two earlier. They met and they became the forgetful person to the other to replace some of that sadness. So in all of this, in light of this story, and knowing how it ends well with Joseph and his brothers, not talking about how they all came together, but knowing how it ended, as we read earlier. Joseph said, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Many things happen that way in our lives. But maybe our real challenge for us today is to think about the people who have helped make us forget. And here I'm talking about spiritually. Can you think about the person who taught you the gospel? Who made the difference and changed your life from serving the devil or serving with no interest in life, no concern about other people, but the message of the gospel came to you, was presented to you, and that truth in obeying the gospel, sin forgiven, new life began. Forgetful. I'm grateful for my forgetfuls. And along the way, I've had several others come along in my spiritual life, but I'm especially grateful for the 2 people who probably had the most significance in teaching me the truth of the gospel. I want to challenge every one of you to think about who that person was that taught you the gospel. if it's possible, try to enter into contact with that person and thank him or her for sharing that truth that helped you to forget the sin that was in your life. But more than that, I also want to challenge you to be a forgetful. To be the person that takes the gospel to others. To teach them the truth about Jesus. To maybe bring people out of their misery into the blessings that God has prepared for them. Be a forgetful. Don't you want to be a forgetful? Raise your hand if you want to be a forgetful. I thought there'd be a difference in the show of hands at this point. You see, people have helped us to forget. We're thankful. We want to help people to forget. And the best thing, the greatest thing that people need forgotten in their lives is a life of sin where they're culpable, where they're guilty of sin, worthy of condemnation. But through Jesus Christ, there's hope. Through Jesus Christ, there's blessings. I found this poem soon after I became a Christian. I was a college student. It meant so much to me at the time. You ask me why I love my Lord? Well, friend, just let me say that life was not worth living until the Savior came my way. You say I miss so much in life? Yes, friend, praise God I do. I miss the sin and sorrow that was all I ever knew. I miss the days spent seeking joy, the long nights full of fears. I miss the heavy burdens that carried me through the years. But I wouldn't have them back. No, not for all that you could pay, because life wasn't worth living till the Savior came my way. That's a theme song for me, but it's not just for me to enjoy by myself. It's to be shared with others. We need to believe that God can work through our disappointments. We need to believe that God is with us. We need to believe that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. Psalm 94, verse 19 says, "Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord has delivered us, or has delivered him out of them all." There will be afflictions and difficult times in our lives. There will be times that come up, we'll want to forget them. But that is really remedied through the power of the gospel. Through transformation in our personal lives to believe and accept that and want to tell others about that. Think of your lives today and for every day God gives you. Be forgetful. Help others to be forgetful.